Welcome to the Wishbook 2026 information session. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. One, captioning is available for today's event. If you would like to enable the caption feed, use the closed caption button at the bottom of the desktop app or in the settings section on mobile devices. Questions will be accepted via the Q&A feature. Please note that for this particular webinar, the chat is disabled, so please feed all questions in through the Q&A feature. And then lastly, today's presentation is being recorded and will be shared on the Foundation's YouTube channel and sent out at a later date. So once again, I welcome you. For those of you who have not met before, my name is Taryn Lumley. I'm a Philanthropic Operations Associate here at the Pittsburgh Foundation. I am a brown-skinned Black biracial woman with curly black hair pulled up into a clip, currently wearing a black dress with a red buffalo check flannel over top of it with a matching bandana and glasses on my head. I have been with the Pittsburgh Foundation since 2018, and during the entire tenure of my career here, I have been part of the Wishbook Project and currently manage the process. So I know folks have applied before, some of you are new to the process. Just to make sure that we're all moving through this presentation from the same baseline of understanding, I'm going to briefly touch about an overview of the Wishbook. So for those of you new, hello, I'm glad you're interested. I'm excited to have new organizations applying. The Wishbook is a soft cover printed book that we mail out to the Foundation's donor community every November. This book contains 100 requests, or as we call them, wishes, of general operating support of $5,000. Once the book is mailed to our donors, they have the option to use their donor advice funds that they hold here to recommend grants to the organizations in the book on a rolling basis from the time they receive it through the end of the grant period, which is typically in February or March. A little history, the Wishbook was started over 15 years ago, and initially it was a way to connect donors to tangible needs in the community. So some of you who have been through this process before may remember in the olden days before COVID, where you would ask for actual items and say, I need 10 bicycles and 10 sets of knee pads and 10 sets of elbow pads and 10 helmets. However, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, we really didn't think it made sense to have people apply for these items in July when they might not be funded until November, December, January. And we had no idea what was going to happen at that point because things were changing so rapidly. So instead, we switched over to general operating support, which are unrestricted dollars that you can use where you see the best fit is. A quick note that will underscore the rest of this presentation. Up top, I mentioned we mail it in November. For 2026, our timeline has been moved up a bit. So the book will actually mail out in October. So we'll go through the timeline in depth a little bit later. But again, if you are someone who's familiar with the book, you may have noticed that you received the announcement email or saw the updated website earlier than in previous years. So since 2018, the Wishbook has granted out almost $4.5 million. Last year's book actually raised $638,000. With that baseline established, we're going to go through the application timeline and kind of go through the process. So here we are in June, which already feels crazy. It feels like just yesterday it was January. We're like, what are we going to do for the year? So June this year, we launched the Wishbook. Again, this is earlier than in years previous because of the October mailing deadline. The application opened on June 1st, and the announcement was sent out. Our webinar, we do halfway through the process. So here we are. You've made it. Thank you for attending on the 12th. And applications are due on June 26th. Please note that we are unable to accept late applications because as we move into July, we go through the internal rounds of review and we do so very quickly. So July, the applications go through internal review by foundation staff before they are then sent to our Wishbook committee, which consists of foundation donors as well as community partners, all of whom have some level of nonprofit experience, whether it be board service or directly as an employee or a CEO or an executive director or a program manager or any type of role at a nonprofit, and they begin their evaluations. They run through the end of July into August, where they meet in person to select the final 100 organizations that will be included in the book. And we'll talk a bit more about that process in a couple of slides. After we have those 100 organizations, we notify all the nonprofits of the decision. So you will receive an approval or a declination. It's not just going to hang out there in the ether and you wonder what happened to it. And as soon as we get those declinations and approvals out, we start production. So production runs starting in July through August and September, where all the copy is written for the book. We have photos that we take if need be. We'll again touch on that a little bit later, and the designer begins the layout. This leads us into October, where fingers crossed, knock on wood, we'll do all the proofing revisions, and then it will be printed and mailed out. The wish book is sent to our community of donor advised fund holders. It is also sent to all the nonprofits that are included in the book. So a frequent question I get is, if I am approved, will I receive a copy? Yes, you will receive a physical copy, and we will also send you a link to the digital one. And then that takes us into our grant period, which runs from October to February. Come March, when the grant period is closed, the project will be complete and we'll send out a notification. So the review process. So looking at those items that I mentioned in the timeline, just to kind of give you an idea of the volume and the scale as we move through this process. Typically, we receive about 200 to 300 applications for the 100 slots in the wish book. So as I mentioned, it goes through internal review first. So if we look at a past example here where we started off with 262 applications, the first round of review is completed by myself, and it's just making sure people follow the criteria, the baseline rules. They're a 501c3, they're in the region, they serve the region, items of that nature, things that cannot be changed. In this previous year, we see here, we've gone from 262 applications to 228 applications. This second round of review is completed by a member of our program team and the Vice President of Philanthropic Resources. And this second round is specifically for anything that might be weird or borderline or has questions around it, such as the chapter of a national organization, or maybe we need more details about what their budget looks like based on what was provided, or someone who is in Ohio but primarily serves one of those border counties, things of those natures that we will go through and make our case-by-case determinations. This previous year, we went from 228 down to 196. Those 196 applications were actually sent to our committee for their evaluations. And just to be clear, when the committee is looking at these applications, they are not making value judgments on your organization. Specifically, what they're looking at within the application is about, do I have a clear enough understanding and enough information to make an informed decision? So if they were a donor and they were reading this, do they understand what you're asking for, how it will be used, and what impact it has? Once they make their decisions as we go through this review process for approvals, please note that approval for the wish book is not a guarantee of funding because we use donor advised funds as the vehicle for these grants. And we'll get way more into that more towards the end of the presentation. But this is to say that because this funding is recommended by donors on these funds, there are organizations who may not be funded. You may receive partial funding and not the full 5,000. You might be fully funded, and occasionally we have organizations that actually receive more than that $5,000. We have been very lucky that the past several years, at least I know for every wish book that I have worked on and many before it, that every organization has received a grant, at least one, if not the full funding. So, how do you access this application? As I mentioned, the application opened on June 1st. It is hosted online in Foundit, which is the application's online grant portal. What we do here at the foundation is we send out an announcement email that also went out on June 1st. The link to Foundit is in there. If you did not receive that email, that is okay because you can also access it via the foundation's website. So if you go to pittsburghfoundation.org, you'll see, as we have here pictured on the left, at the top, there's a menu bar that will say donor login, grantee login, professional advisors, scholarship. If you click on grantee login, that will take you to Found It. And my colleague Whitney will actually drop the link to Found It in the chat, and it will be in these slides, which will be shared afterwards. So once you get to Found It, you do have to log in. Applications will only be accepted online. Once you get here, we have our login page pictured on the left. You'll enter your email address, your existing password, and you'll log on. If you have forgotten your password, that's okay. There is a little blue button underneath, and you can say forgot your password, and it will send you a code to reset. If you do not have a logon, you do need to create one. So you'll click on the Create New Account button, and it'll take you through some fields about your organization, about your contact information to set up that profile. If you're not sure if you have one or not, maybe you remember applying for something in the past, but you're not sure if it's still active, we do ask that you please reach out before creating a new one. And a member of our team will look in the system and confirm whether or not you have an existing one. If not, you'll be all clear to create a new one. If so, they will then go through the process to reset it and get you access to that account. We have some guidelines that are over here for easy troubleshooting, the items I just mentioned. Rob Knoll manages our application portal. So if you do have any questions that require technical assistance, you're welcome to reach out to myself, but you can also reach out to Rob directly at knollr@pghfdn.org. Once you are logged in, that will take you to your applicant dashboard. Now, this example is a little bit bare. Yours will have a lot more information put on it. But the key thing that we're going to talk about is up top in the left-hand corner, there are these buttons. There's the Pittsburgh Foundation and Community Foundation of Westmoreland County's logos, a little home icon that'll bring you back to this dashboard, and then a button that says apply. You want to click on apply, and that will take you to a list of open applications. Once you get that application, you'll scroll through the open ones until you find 2026 Wishbook application, and you can hit preview, which will provide you with a PDF of the application questions in case you need to share them with staff members or with board. If you're ready to begin your submission, you will click on the blue apply button, and then you will enter the fields once you're completed. At the bottom of the application, you have two options. You can save the application or submit it. If you save the application, that means your fields will be left as is, and you have the option to come back, return, and make more edits. Once you submit the application, that will push it forward for review and processing. You have to submit the application before it will be considered. So just always double check before the deadline, because I know I've also had where I've hit save and I met submit and vice versa. And note that if you mean to save and you accidentally submit, that is okay as well. Our team can go in and revert that status so that you can continue to edit it. Applications are due on June 26th, 2026 at 4:59 p.m. This is a Monday. We do not have expectations that people complete applications over the weekend. However, I recognize everyone's schedules are different and time might be more accessible on the weekend for you as opposed to during the work week. So we do give you that weekend in order to complete your submission. There are no exceptions for late applications. This is because, as I mentioned, we have a very tight turnaround from submission to review to production. Criteria in preference language. So this is going to tell us what is a eligible wish versus not. So first off, what is the difference between criteria and preference? If you fail to meet criteria, that will disqualify your application from inclusion. However, preference language is a little bit more flexible. So if we're looking at preference language and we have two organizations that are equal across all fields and all evaluations, and one meets the preference language where the other doesn't, the one that does will be given priority to move forward in comparison to the one that does not. So starting with the criteria, and I do apologize, this is a very word-heavy slide, which honestly is one of my biggest pet peeves, but we do send this out as a resource afterwards. One, you must have a current public 501c3 status or a fiscal sponsor. You can only submit one wish per organization. If you submit multiple applications, our team will reach out and ask you to select one because we recognize that sometimes there's miscommunication. Maybe multiple staff members both thought it was assigned to them. That is perfectly fine. However, if we reach out and no one responds, both applications will automatically be disqualified. Wishes are for general operating support. So general operating support, unrestricted dollars where you can see how they're most well used based on your experience. So if you're like, actually, I need to pay staff, you can pay staff. Or actually, I need to make a repair, you can make that repair. Whatever needs you have, we know that you know your organization better than we do and better than our donors do. So we want to make sure that you're using those funds where you see most fit. These wishes are for $5,000. There is a question that asks for the wish amount. You can put in less or you can put in more, but it will be listed in the book as 5,000. And then it must be in southwestern Pennsylvania. So the wish must either be located in the organization that is, or serving Allegheny, Armstrong, Beaver, Butler, Fayette, Greene, Indiana, Mercer, Lawrence, Somerset, Venango, Washington, or Westmoreland counties. So located in or providing 75% of your services in those counties. Two notes here. One, there will be 10 slots reserved for Westmoreland County. Those of you unfamiliar, the Community Foundation of Westmoreland County is actually part of the Pittsburgh Foundation and part of our umbrella. And then we will also be saving 10 spots for organizations outside of Allegheny and Westmoreland counties. So it'll be 20 non-Allegheny organizations and 80 Allegheny. You must be a small to mid-sized budget nonprofit. And when we say that in the context of the Wish Book, and Wish Book specifically, we're looking at $1.5 million or under. Please note that we do recognize that budgets don't end perfectly round numbers. So you're like, oh no, it's 1.5 million, but I'm over by $42.30. That is okay. And then lastly, this is a change from previous years. This used to be preference languages, but is now part of our criteria, is if you were in the year before, you are automatically disqualified from the current application process. So those organizations included in 2025 will not be included in 2026. And the reason why we do this is because we are receiving an increasing volume of applications and we want to make sure to give as many organizations the opportunity to be included as possible. So the preference language, these are the pieces that you do not have to hit, but if you do, you will be weighted a little bit higher. So for our preferences, we give preferences linked to our organizations that are aligned with the foundation directed grant making areas that we have outlined in our strategic plan. Those are arts and culture, economic mobility, environmental action, equity and social justice, and basic needs. Here on this slide, I've listed out kind of what qualifies under those. So basic needs, food, shelter, physical and mental health care, childcare, education, employment, equity and social justice. We're looking at civic participation and community-driven solutions. Environmental actions, this is equitable access to air, water, and land, as well as learning and action. Economic mobility, home ownership, this is access to post-secondary education, career advancement, and entrepreneurship. And then last but not least, arts and culture. And this is supporting the lives and careers of individual artists and strengthening small to mid-sized arts organizations. If you want to learn more about our organization's foundation-directed grant-making areas, you can go online to pittsburghfoundation.org/grants. My colleague Whitney will drop that in the chat to learn about our foundation-directed grant-making and our cycles. Please also note that these categories, their preference, not criteria. So if you're like, I don't know if I fit into those, that is okay. I would also want to just say here too that some of these priorities on our grant making side, our foundation directed grant making, are invitation only. So just to be clear up front, inclusion in the wish book under one of these categories does not automatically transfer over as applicability to our foundation directed grant making. Please see our website for more specifics about that. The questions. So here's what's actually on the application. One, we ask for your mission in about 25 words or less. What is your operating budget? And when we are looking at a budget, there's no spreadsheets, there's no audits, there's no financial statements. We just need a number. We ask what county you're located in and or serve. We ask to which of the categories does your wish fall? So which of those buckets that we just discussed? You're then asked to describe your wish. What are you asking for? What needs are you experiencing? What changes are you having? Are you expanding programming? Do you need more staffing? Again, these dollars can flex based from that initial request. However, just an idea of what these funds may be used for. We ask for your overall population served, and this is super simple. We're looking for a number and a unit. 10 dogs, 50 families, 132 people. We then ask you to upload a photo. So for the wish book, it is an image followed by the blurb. We ask that you submit an image and the specs regarding that image are included in the application itself that can be published. So it has to have permission, it has certain resolution requirements that it has to hit. However, we recognize that many organizations, particularly looking at this budget size, may not have access to a photographer and may not have the photography skills themselves. And that is perfectly okay. You still have to submit an upload for us to consider. However, if you have an image and for any reason we can't use it, whether it be content or size or resolution, we will send out a member of our photography team that we work with to capture an image that represents your organization well and accompanies your wish in the book. And these photographers work really hard to make sure that one, they're staying true to the mission, to the vibe of your organization, that they're accurately representing the work that you're due. And they work very closely with you to be as least disruptive as possible. So if you work with sensitive clientele and you're like, we can't photograph them, that is okay. They'll say, can we have stand-ins? Or do you have something that you can show us to capture that image? No one will be excluded because they have a bad photo. If we do have to capture that photo, we ask that you provide us a contact to do so. And this should be someone who is available and is on site, whether it be a program manager, whether it be a coordinator, and it could be you submitting the application because we recognize that you wear many hats, but just whoever that person that will be there to open the door, as we say, to provide their information. We ask if you're using a fiscal sponsor. If you are not, you would just hit no, and then it'll take you to the last question. If you are, it'll prompt a couple of more questions. What is their name and what is their EIN? And that's just so that if you are approved, it makes it a lot easier for us to get you set up on our grants end. And lastly, we ask how long the application took. And this is not a judgment criteria. This is not something that our evaluators look at and make determinations based on. This is just because we hope that Wishbook is one of our more accessible practices and processes. So this should take maybe 30 minutes to an hour. But if I get back 1 year feedback that it's taking everyone 16 days, that means I have to go back and fix something to slim it down. So that's just so that we can make improvements to the process. Westmoreland County. So I just mentioned the Community Foundation of Westmoreland County is part of our umbrella. We have 10 organizations that will be included. These organizations are actually selected by a committee of Westmoreland County leaders and donors. And this is just a note that it goes through the exact same process, exact same criteria. It's just a more localized pool of reviewers. So some tips as you move forward with your application. You want to fully but briefly describe your organization, and I know that can be hard, but look at who you are, what do you do, what services do you offer, what are your areas of impact, what is it that makes your organization special? Is there a standout program that you would like to highlight? You want to avoid vagueness. You want to avoid one sentence descriptions because we know that you're passionate about your organization and we really want to help the readers of the Wish Book feel that passion too. One thing that I will say through my time working on this project that I've gotten from multiple committees is really looking at how you convey what you do and the impact that it leads to. Now, you've got the announcement, you've come to the webinar, you've reviewed the criteria, you've decided to submit an application, and you were approved. What happens next? How do grants work? Again, just to make sure we're all operating from the same page here, we have two main types of grant making here at the Pittsburgh Foundation. One is our foundation directed grant making or discretionary grant making. These are the funds that are directed by the foundation and its program staff, including our traditional grant process and some of our special initiatives. This is what you think of when you submit an application, it's reviewed by a program officer, and then it moves to the board for a recommended approval or declination. I myself am not a program officer, so I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but you can find more information about our foundation directed grant making on our website at pittsburghfoundation.org/grant. And again, my colleague Whitney will be dropping that into the chat for you. The other type of grant making that we do, and this is the part that is relevant for the Wish Book, is donor directed grant making. So donor-directed grants are influenced by advisors on donor funds, such as a donor advised fund. Just to get the disclaimers off at the beginning, you cannot solicit donor-directed funding. Again, this is on a donor timeline. A key thing to note here is that donor-directed grant making, because it's coming from this other side where it's advised on by individuals, does not interfere with any foundation-directed processes. So if you have an open grant with the program officer here, or you're considering applying and you're worried about, well, if I do Wishbook, does that make me ineligible or vice versa? For this particular instance, that is not the case. We do have more information about donor advised funding. We'll touch on it briefly in the next slide, but there is actually a webinar from a couple of years ago on our YouTube channel that you can access, and my colleague Whitney will drop that link in the chat. So the grant process itself, the vehicle for Wishbook funding is donor advised funds. So for a donor advised fund, an organization, typical community foundation, someone comes to us, they establish a fund, that fund earns interest, and they can recommend that the interest from that fund go to charitable organizations. Our donors receive the book, recommend grants from their funds, which are paid on a rolling basis from November to March. This year, it will be from October to February. For these grants through the Wishbook process, we do not require acknowledgement letters, thank yous, receipts, any of those items. If a donor is open to and would like to receive or has even requested an acknowledgement or a thank you note, we make sure to provide you that information in the payment letter so you can send them that piece of mail directly. However, if you don't receive that language, you do not have to send those acknowledgements forward. And we have tried to streamline this process because we recognize while people think, oh, it's a really simple thing I can do, that if you are a staff member, it does take up your time. And we want to make sure that we're considering the work that you have to do, particularly as we get into year end. We all know that that is the craziest fundraising part of the year. And as I mentioned earlier, because this is donor-directed funding, full funding is not guaranteed, though again, we have been very lucky to have every organization receive a grant in the past. Pictured here on the left is the Bond family. So here we have John and Betty Bond with their kids and their daughter and their grandkids, and they actually sit together as a family around the holidays and review the book. And the children actually get to pick organizations to recommend grants to. So it is something that we work to do as a tool to really engage our donors on a more personal level, but also to engage multiple generations. And that is the bulk of my content. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and look at the Q&A. If you have any questions, again, please put them in the Q&A feed and I will go through and answer them. So one of the questions we have, I'm curious how to make a compelling and clear submission if it's for general operating support. Should the app focus on the mission or impact instead of what you want to use the dollars for specifically? So I would say that you're really focusing on the work that you're doing and translating that to how does it positively impact the people that you serve. So you can list what you want to use it for. So if you say, I would like to do marketing materials, that is okay. But then you should emphasize that I would like to do marketing materials so that I can reach further into the community and get more people access to these services. If we serve multiple counties, should we indicate all the counties we serve? We serve 5 counties, including Allegheny and Westmoreland. If you serve multiple counties, you can only select one for the actual box on the question. So typically we recommend is the county that you primarily serve if you're not within the region, or the county that you are located in if you are within the region. However, you're welcome to mention either in the population served or in your description of your wish that you serve multiple counties. What is the word count on the wish description? So I do not remember it off the top of my head. When you go in to access the application, you will actually be able to see the character limits and counts for all of the questions in real time. And if anything is under or over, it will give you a notification to tweak it before the application is submitted. Can the general public give to the wish book? No. So we do not have the means at this time to take in funds from the public to give through the wish book. However, what we can do is encourage you to take the wish book and tell people to give to you directly, which is what we do if we do get outside of inquiries. So if someone comes to us that doesn't have a fund and asks us, oh, can I give to this organization in the wish book? We encourage them to reach out and to directly make a donation to your organization. And you are more than welcome to do so as well. So we do have a digital version that if you would like to share it and be like, hey, we are included, this is something that you might want to consider. If you want to take a look at it, they can give directly to you as well. Is it better to focus on one area of need or use multiple areas together? For example, focus on staff funding and or utility support. That is really at your discretion. The key thing isn't necessarily what specific items you're looking for, it's just being clear about what you intend to do with it. I know that's not always the most satisfying answer. We do have people who list specific items and it resonates well with the committee and they say, I'm going to do staffing or I'm going to do this. Or we do have people who say, we have multiple needs that we are trying to service and we're going to put it where it's most fitting. It's really just about conveying the impact of supporting those needs. I serve 4 of the counties. If there's more availability of slots for outside Westmoreland County, would it be better to list a different county? What would really make the most sense is to where you do the bulk of your services. Because when our donors are looking at the book and they're considering that funding, that is a key component for them. For some people who, again, are Community Foundation or Westmoreland donors, it resonates a lot stronger. We just want to be accurate in what the information that you're providing is. So if you're like, actually, most of my services are in Westmoreland, we would say Westmoreland. If you say most of my services are in Allegheny, then we would recommend Allegheny. Note that while there are more slots for Allegheny, it's also a higher volume of applications that come in. So there's not really a yes or no that you can make clear cut here. We're just looking at where is the bulk of your services slash where are you located? Because we recognize that might not be the same for every organization. One item that I forgot to mention earlier that I often get asked in the process, I mentioned that if you have an image that we can't use and we send out that team of photographers, one, that image, we'll use it in the book. It might be also used in foundation publications. We may feature you on our socials. Um, but we provide those images to the organizations. So you are welcome to use the images that the photographers capture in your publications going forward. There's no cost. The only thing that we ask is that you please provide an image credit when they're in use. Anyone else have any other questions? Looks like we've made it through the bulk of the feed. Give it about a minute here, and if not, let everyone get back to their day. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. My contact information is here on the screen. My email address is my last name and first initial, so LUMLEYT@pghfdn.org. You can also reach me at philanthropicresources@pghfdn.org, and you're welcome to give me a phone call. My number is 412-394-2622. And again, we'll send out this presentation as well as a link to the recording of the webinar so that you can access these materials. That I hope everyone has a good day, has a wonderful weekend, and gets to enjoy the sunshine.